After almost 3 weeks, Seminole fans, game day is almost upon us. Welcome to the Nole Insiders Game Preview delivered by UPS. I'm Lane Hurt along with Tim Linnefelt. Tim, we played Alabama 20 days ago. Now, thanks to Hurricane Irma delaying things, we lost one game. We had to postpone the Miami game until October 7th. Is this like game one all over again?
It sort of feels that way, doesn't it? You think about the matchups and the strengths and weaknesses of each team, and you start to think to yourself, well, what do I really know about Florida State right now? You kind of have to go back and remember, and how much can be gleaned. Not that the Alabama game wasn't significant, but that's such a different type of opponent than what you're going to face the rest of the way. So a lot of unknowns, of course. James Blackman finally set to make his first start. Some unknowns there. We've heard lots of good things about him, but as of yet, haven't seen him in game because he hasn't played a game yet. So you're going to take the lid off of that box, so to speak, and see what he has to offer. But NC State was asked about that earlier this week, and they said that it almost feels like it's an opener. Yeah. Dave Doran, their coach, said it would be one thing if DeAndre Francois was going to be their quarterback, and he's got a season's worth of film, and we played him last year. But with Blackman, they're going on high school film. They're going on recruiting cut-ups that people were using in their recruiting offices. So a lot of unknowns. To me, it makes for one of the more fascinating FSU ACC games in really quite a while because there's just so much that we don't know.
Yeah, it does work both ways, like you said, Tim. While Florida State is not quite sure what they have in Blackman yet, well, NC State has no clue at all. And let's talk a little bit about NC State. They're 2-1 to start the season. Their lone loss came against South Carolina in their opener, a thrilling ball game. Ryan Finley is their quarterback. He's gone 192 pass attempts without an interception. That leads the NCAA at this time. They are 13th in the country in passing yards per game, 11th in rushing defense, 90th in pass defense. Maybe a little easier to throw it than run it. A good test for Blackman. What sticks out to you when you look at this Wolfpack team?
Well, I think you got to start with that front seven. Bradley Chubb, the defensive end, is one of the best in the ACC, probably one of the best in the country. Probably going to be playing on Sundays this time next year. All of those guys are seniors. All four defensive linemen, all three linebackers are either a senior or a fifth-year senior. They're really experienced. Jimbo said the other day, looking at the film, he's like, I go back and watch their film from 2, 3, 4 years ago. It's all the same dudes. So, that to me is going to be a big matchup for Florida State. You got a freshman quarterback making his first start against one of the best defensive lines, best defensive fronts in the ACC, if not the country. Go back last year to the game up in Raleigh. Florida State had a really tough time running the ball against NC State, and that was with Dalvin Cook. You saw DeAndre Francois make some big plays. Naquan Murray sort of had one of his coming out parties for the end of the season. Florida State was able to get out of Raleigh with a win thanks to its passing game. Are they going to have to do that again? We'll have to kind of wait and see. I think in an ideal world, Florida State would establish the run with Jacques Patrick and Cam Akers and then open things up for James Blackman to make some easier throws and get comfortable. But maybe that won't be as easy as it would have been against maybe, say, a ULM 2 weeks ago. So you might have to come out throwing. And you know what? Jimbo Fisher kind of has a way of sort of throwing a wrench into what you think he's going to do. Conventional wisdom, wherever that means or wherever it comes from, says that Florida State will try to establish the run to start the game. Would it shock you if he did exactly the opposite? One, out of respect for NC State's front seven, but two, just because he likes to zag when people think he's going to zig.
I agree with that, Tim, because I think one of the important things in this game is making Blackman comfortable, which I think means throwing the ball early, finding those 2 or 3 plays that he's really comfortable with, and getting him in a rhythm.
Well, and also, coaches like to say all the time, if you can throw to one of your running backs out of the backfield, maybe throw them in the flats or a little shallow route, that's almost as good as a run. Give them the ball, a little bit of space and maybe make somebody miss. You can pick up 2, 3, 4 yards on first down and get into more manageable situations. So maybe that's something they can do as well.
Yeah, on the other side of the ball, NC State's offense, they like to throw it around. Finley has looked really good to start this season. Florida State's pass defense should be one of its strengths. It could be a good-on-good situation there.
Absolutely. Like you mentioned with Ryan Finley, the thing about him is he's not going to turn it over. And when you're playing an underdog, which NC State is, playing on the road in a difficult environment, having a quarterback who isn't going to make those types of mistakes or typically doesn't make those types of mistakes is sort of a feather in your cap. So if you're Florida State, you want to do the exact opposite. Forcing turnovers, getting short fields, anything you can do to help out the offense, particularly not to keep belaboring the point about a first-year quarterback, but an early interception that is returned or happens on NC State's side of the field, that helps, right? So you want to try to make him as uncomfortable as possible and maybe try to force some of those turnovers, give the offense as best a situation as possible.
Well, let's get to our matchup of the week, and we're going to go with offensive weapon for the Wolfpack, Jalen Samuels versus Derwin James, our defensive weapon. Derwin said it himself. Jalen Samuels reminds him of himself, and Samuels does it all for the NC State team. 26 catches. He had 15 alone against South Carolina. He has 5 total TDs on the year, I think 2 rushing, 3 receiving. He's a guy that'll line up in a lot of different spots. Derwin's going to line up in a lot of different spots. It should be a lot of fun to watch those two when they have a chance to match up.
Yeah, and it's almost kind of like a, I don't know, maybe a preview of what's to come in football, which is guys maybe not having defined positions as much and just sort of being lined up wherever they can be most effective. We've seen that with Derwin James. We've seen that with a few other members of Florida State's defense here and there. Starting to see it on offense with Jalen Samuels. To me, the biggest compliment you can pay to him was at ACC kickoff this summer when they're handing out the preseason ballots. They had a slot for an all-purpose back. You could vote on an all-purpose back. They'd never done that before. There had never been an all-purpose back before on the preseason All-ACC team. Whether or not there'll be one next year, who knows? But the idea was everybody knew that Jalen Samuels was one of the best players in the ACC, but nobody knew where to slot him. Nobody knew where to put him, so they had to create a space for him to be included, and no surprise that he was. So, yeah, we'll see. I don't think stopping him doesn't come down solely to Derwin James, obviously. No. It's going to depend on what he does. But if you have a guy who lines up all over the field, who switches things, tries to confuse, tries to throw you off balance with where he is, who better to counteract that than the guy that Florida State uses to do that? So Derwin said, he didn't say he was going to be lined up right against him, but when you mentioned it to him, and Lane, you asked the question, he seems sort of excited about the idea. Like he liked the idea of going up against somebody like that. So it wouldn't surprise me at all to see those two butt heads, more than a few times on Saturday.
There you have it. The Seminoles are finally back on the field in their home opener. We got a flyover for this game. Military Appreciation Day, always a special day inside Doak Campbell Stadium. So make sure you get out and support your Noles. Tim Linnefelt will have his 1st and 10. Make sure you read that on Seminoles.com. A must-read to get ready for any Florida State football game. We'll have your 3 keys on Saturday morning as Florida State finally continues its season with their home opener. NC State, Florida State, noon inside Doak Campbell Stadium. You don't want to miss it. For Tim, I'm Lane. Go Noles.